2013, 2015, Michigan State hopes to knock off the Buckeyes again and carve its own path to a championship in the Big Ten. We talk Michigan State football with Ryan O'Blennis. You can catch him and the rest of the staff there at The Only Colors on SB Nation, breaking down Michigan State football. Ryan, a huge week.
It's a big one. The winner of this Michigan State-Ohio State game will, put themselves in the driver's seat for a Big Ten East division title and a trip to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. ESPN College Game Day will be there as well, so a lot of buzz around it.
So I don't know necessarily, even though I talked to you and other Michigan State folks on that side of the, you could call it a rivalry to a certain extent. Of course, for Michigan State, it's all about Michigan, and for Ohio State, it's all about Michigan. But this has actually turned out to be a more important game in recent history, as I just noted, 2013, 2015, and others. If you talk to somebody my son's age, he would tell you that Michigan State has been the chief rival to Ohio State, and maybe secondarily Wisconsin or Penn State in the last decade in determining Big Ten championships. So I'm sure that you've got a number of memories of this series and what it means to Michigan State in the Big Ten.
Yeah, definitely. During the kind of the height of the Mark D'Antonio era, when you had Michigan State teams that were getting college football playoff spots and, going to the Rose Bowl, things like that, you still had to go through Ohio State in order to accomplish those feats. And, I think D'Antonio and MSU were one of the only teams that beat Urban Meyer's Ohio State's teams twice. That 2013 game, of course, in the Big Ten championship, that was huge. And then the 2015 game when Michael Geiger kicked a field goal and windmilled his way down the sideline or down the field to win the game. Yep, that's something that Michigan State fans will never forget. That was a huge moment that catapulted them to the college football playoff, which is obviously, something that not a lot of teams have accomplished. So, there were definitely pretty big moments in those games.
I think I got that wrong. I think he wound it up the other way. So, Michigan State, the only other team besides Ohio State to reach a college football playoff. So, wow. And this is an incredible statistic to me. Ohio State's, other than the year between Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, if you take that out with the interim coach Luke Fickell and all the suspensions and everything that happened there with the NCAA, Ohio State's worst record in the Big Ten since 2004 is 7-1. So they've owned the conference. There's no question about that. Even when they haven't won the Big Ten championship, they have somehow found a place to be determined as the team in the Big Ten. And Michigan State, as you just mentioned, on two occasions and others, has been the one school to derail that at times. And again, it's not been about Ohio State. It's been about Michigan State because they've forged their own path to a Big Ten championship in a Rose Bowl or a college football playoff appearance. Mel Tucker, as you mentioned to me before we came on, made an interesting statement about the standard not being Ohio State, which many in the Big Ten, James Franklin's made this comment. Jim Harbaugh, maybe in a more vague way, has made the comment, and others across the Big Ten. It's obvious that Ohio State is the standard, but Mel Tucker wants to create his own standard and identity there at Michigan State.
Absolutely. I think, some of what makes what Michigan State's done this season so special and what makes Mel Tucker such a fan favorite coach is the fact that he's laid down the foundation and he's building the culture up to make Michigan State that kind of destination school. They have their own set of standards. They don't care about what others have done. Tucker also said that what happened isn't necessarily what's going to happen in the future. So, what happens on game day this Saturday is most important. But that's what is going to really kind of dictate where this program goes, is the fact that Tucker sets his own standards, for the program, and the players have bought into that 100%. And I think that's why the Spartans have had such a surprising season, is because, Tucker has led that kind of mindset after Michigan State had a couple of years where they struggled in a row, he's really turned around that mindset and that culture. And, eventually he wants Michigan State to be the place where, the school that you have to go through to win Big Ten championships. Right now it's still Ohio State, and, Michigan State has a chance to do that on Saturday, but that is what he's trying to build toward.
Absolutely. Both teams at 9-1. Ohio State undefeated in the Big Ten. Michigan State lost to Purdue a couple weeks ago. Before we get to the matchup, certainly injuries could play a role. We discussed that the last couple weeks in anticipation of the Purdue game and Maryland. What do we know about injuries right now for Michigan State? I know that there's not any definites, but in regards to how much you could possibly piece together in anticipating who's going to be ready on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Tucker, as we mentioned before on the show, he doesn't really give updates, but, Jalen Naylor is still dealing with a hand injury that he suffered, a couple weeks ago. And, he could be out again. And, other receivers you saw step up this week, like Montori Foster on the flea flicker, and Trey Mosley has had a big couple of weeks without Naylor. But, just having Naylor's speed in there and his playmaking ability really gives the offense another dimension. On the offensive line, Jared Horse, the left tackle, has missed the last couple of weeks. He could be out again for undisclosed reasons. We're not really sure. Matt Carrick is a guard who, he would rotate in often, and he's out for the season with a leg injury. On the defensive side of the ball, Cale Halliday's been playing with a club on his hand. The other linebacker, Quavaris Crouch, he missed the last game against Maryland on Saturday, so we'll see what his availability looks like. Charles Brantley, the cornerback freshman, he missed the game against Maryland, and he's likely possibly out for the rest of the season, or at least for a long period of time. So I doubt we'll see him this weekend. Matt Coughlin, the kicker, he's been dealing with some injuries. He came in and out of the game on Saturday against Maryland after not playing against Purdue. So I think Tucker said, they're going to monitor his status throughout the week of practice and see, how he does. But yeah, Tucker made a comment that really nobody across the country is really healthy at this point. So it's next man up mentality, and other guys will have to step up if those guys are out.
Folks, it's Christmas time. We know that you're on Amazon, most of you. So when you do use Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section below. It's the same shopping experience, does not cost you a penny. So you might as well use the link that we provide in the description section, put it somewhere where you will remember it when you do your shopping on Amazon. We got Ryan O'Blennis on the line from SB Nation's The Only Colors, a great destination for this week in particular, with a big showdown at the Shoe against Ohio State. Buckeyes and the Spartans battling for the Big Ten Eastern Division Championship. As Ryan mentioned earlier, the winner will be in the driver's seat. So looking at the Michigan State secondary, Aiden O'Connell, as we talked about last week, put up one of the biggest passing days in the history of the Big Ten, 536 yards passing. The 350 that Talia Tagovailoa put up, less meaningful as Michigan State jumped out to a 2-score lead rather quickly, and it was 2 to 3 scores throughout the second half, but still a 350 spot in yardage for him. I'm sure that Mel Tucker and company understand what C.J. Stroud and what is considered to be the best wide receiver room in college football is capable of after a couple lackluster, by their standards, performances against Nebraska and Penn State, put up a 59 against Purdue.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this Michigan State defense that has struggled throughout the year to defend the pass does against such a potent offense with C.J. Stroud and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and it's just such a explosive offense. I think they're averaging something like 46 points a game, and ridiculous amount of yardage, 500 plus per game. So this week, you saw Michigan State kind of switch up a little bit and bring a lot more pressure than we've seen throughout the year. And I think that kind of rattled Maryland. I think Tagovailoa had like 3 different intentional grounding penalties because he was just trying to get rid of the ball because the pressure was actually getting there and forcing bad throws. So it was good to see them actually try something new and make some adjustments after they were torched through the air by Purdue. As you mentioned, they still gave up 350 yards, and it wasn't perfect, it was inconsistent, but it was a step in the right direction of progress. This week against Ohio State, just a step in the right direction isn't going to cut it, because the Buckeyes they can score at will. So it's going to take some turnovers. It's going to take a lot better play overall, and the offense is going to have to somehow try to keep pace with Ohio State. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two teams match up on the field on Saturday.
61% against the spread, 77% against the money line. Join us on Patreon for my picks, as well as some media contributors that you see frequently here at the Voice of College Football and their picks each and every week. Ryan O'Blend is here to talk up Michigan State going to Columbus this weekend, the biggest game in the Big Ten thus far this season. No doubt about that. Catch Ryan's work there at SB Nation's The Only Colors. On the flip side of this situation, of course, another big week from the trifecta of Peyton Thorne, Jaden Reed, and, of course, Kenneth Walker, the third at running back, 143 yards on 30 carries, and the other two, again, turned in prolific offensive showings against an Ohio State defense that's improving. Your thoughts about Michigan State's attack and how well it stands at this point in the season?
I think what you saw on Saturday is just how balanced the Michigan State offense can be. Maryland actually did a pretty good job early in the game of stacking the box and containing Kenneth Walker. Eventually, he broke through because he's Kenneth Walker the third. But in the early game, they sold out on the run, and they made Peyton Thorne beat them with a lot of man coverage, single coverage, and Jaden Reed had a couple of touchdowns. He had a big game after being quiet the last couple of weeks. Thorne had a really efficient game. He had the interception on the Hail Mary at the end of the half that shouldn't really be held against him. But outside of that, he played really well, and he made Maryland pay for kind of selling out on the run. Walker eventually still got to over 140 yards. I think it was the third straight time he's done that, and he continues to have a Heisman type campaign. He scored a couple more touchdowns again. They showed a graphic of him and Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram, the last two running backs who won the Heisman Trophy. They showed their three pictures and statistics side by side through the first 9 or 10 games, and Walker's numbers were just as good, if not better, than those guys. So he's definitely keeping pace for that. But yeah, I think my takeaway from that is just how balanced this Michigan State offense can be, and they're definitely going to need that on Saturday against Ohio State.
So when I saw the Ohio State-Purdue line released, I had the same reaction a lot of people did, because Purdue's a quality team. They had just beaten Michigan State. They beat Iowa. Their other losses in the Big Ten were fairly close, even though Wisconsin stretched the lead late. They were competitive. And that line was 21 points. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Purdue's going to cover that line. And Ohio State could have made it 35 at the end of the game, but they won by 28. So they covered the line. And it's not surprising that I look at the line this week. I just checked it out just here in the last few seconds. So Ohio State's a 19-point favorite against Michigan State. I don't know if the players, this is often conjectured that they get riled up or fired up or pumped up because they feel disrespected by a Vegas line. I would think the Big Ten championship would be a better motivation, but it's just kind of startling when you see two teams of this quality and you see a 19-point spread.
Yeah, you're probably not going to see a lot of matchups with two 9-1 teams where the line is that large, but at the same time, I understand it. Ohio State's offense is just so potent, and Michigan State's defense has struggled. So, it makes sense to have a 19-point line, in my opinion. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be, that big from Ohio State, but I don't necessarily have an issue with where the line's at, and the players, they might use it as bulletin board material, but like you said, the more important thing is knowing that, as Mel Tucker said, they have the opportunity to play meaningful games in November. So, we're getting toward the end of the season. There's only 2 games left. You have a chance right here this weekend to beat Ohio State. It doesn't matter what the stats say. It doesn't matter what the line says. You go out there and you play and you come away with a win, then you're going to get the respect that you need from the college football playoff committee or from the odds makers or whatever.
Yeah, Mel Tucker focused on this team, this situation, this game, and so I don't expect him to do this, as you had mentioned before about where his focus lies. But if he wanted to pull from the past, I think in that Matt Geiger game, I'm almost certain Ohio State was a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. So it's certainly been done before. What would be the formula for an upset? What would that look like from a Michigan State side?
I think, like we just talked about, you're going to need a lot of balance because, Ohio State, they can be beaten through the air, but they're pretty decent against the run. So, they can kind of bottle up Kenneth Walker III, kind of similar to what Maryland did early. So, if they're doing that, Peyton Thorne, Jaden Reed, and those guys are going to need to be getting open and making plays on the passing game. And then, eventually when you make them respect the passing game, you go back to Walker, you let him kind of control the ball, control the clock, ice the game, just kind of try to play keep away from that offense that can score at will. Defensively, it's, kind of inevitable that Ohio State's going to move the ball, get yards, get points. But, one thing that Michigan State has been pretty dang good at this year is stopping teams in the red zone, forcing field goals or turnovers. So I don't think Michigan State likes to use this term, but they've been a bend, don't break defense for most of the year. And, you're going to need to kind of have that strategy again where, like I said, because it's going to be kind of inevitable that Ohio State's going to move the ball within the 20s. But if you can keep them out of the end zone and force 3 points or less, then you're going to give yourself a lot better chance to win. So it's going to come down to having to make more adjustments in the secondary and trying to limit the big plays as much as possible. But when it matters most in the red zone, you got to see that Michigan State defense has to step up and limit the points.
Penn State and Nebraska played well in the red zone defensively against Ohio State, forced field goals, also got some stops, flat out stops in the red zone, kept the game close. Purdue was not able to do that. Purdue also made mistakes that gifted Ohio State points or put them in prime position to score points. And obviously you can't do that against Ohio State. One last thing comes to mind, Ryan, is that Ohio State's back seven is improving, but still susceptible to the big play, still going to give up yardage, not a elite unit, but the defensive line is getting better and better and better, and that's what was expected, that it would be arguably the best defensive line in the country, and they are coming on. So your confidence in the Michigan State pass protection?
Saw them play a little bit better this past weekend against Maryland, but that is, like I mentioned, there are injuries along the offensive line and guys banged up in general. So, I do expect Ohio State to be able to get some pressure off of the edge. Like you said, they have a really good defensive line and edge rushers, and they're going to make their plays. I think Ohio State's given up something like 261 yards through the air. So, maybe if those edge rushers are getting there too quickly, throw some screens, throw some short passes, get the balls in your hands of your playmaker and get the ball out of Thorne's hands quickly. Thorne's, been a pretty good decision maker throughout the year. He hasn't turned the ball over too much, although he's done it more in the past few games than he did throughout the rest of the season. But, he's pretty trustworthy with the football in his hands. So, I think that is going to be a key matchup, is kind of that Michigan State offensive line and pass protection against those Ohio State edge rushers. And, if you're just going to let those guys wreck the game, kind of like, Michigan State ended up winning the game, but in that game against Michigan, Aiden Hutchinson, and is it Olaj?
David Ojabo. Yeah.
Those guys wrecked the game a bit for Michigan. So you can't really have that happening with, arguably more talented pass rushers with Ohio State. So, at least collectively. So it's going to be, definitely a key matchup there.
It is not considered the chief rival of either team. It's not considered one of the big main rivals that you think of in the Big Ten. But when it comes right down to it, this has probably been the most important game in the conference consistently over the past 10 years. Michigan State, Ohio State in Columbus. Maybe one other thing real quick, Ryan, just in regards to nothing for sure on this front, but a lot of speculation and talk out there about Mel Tucker signing a contract extension.
Yeah, there's been a few reports coming in about that. It's still unconfirmed from the school. We haven't been able to confirm that ourselves, but we have had several people who have now reported that Tucker is going to get a pretty massive extension. There were rumors earlier in the year that LSU wanted to court him and things like that, and then there's a USC job open and things like that. So I think the Michigan State brass kind of stepped up and have been negotiating with him and wanted to put those rumors to rest. The reports out there are that he's going to make somewhere, a Ryan Day money area. So I think, close to $7 or $8 million a year. Right now, I think he's making $5 or $5.5 million a year. So, and there'll probably be some pretty good incentives in there as well. So, yeah, we'll see, when that news breaks.
Yeah, the widespread thought when Mel Tucker was hired at Michigan State that for a coach that only had 1 year of head coaching experience at Colorado that produced a 5-7 record, that Michigan State overpaid for him. We would have to reevaluate that statement now. 9-1, top 10 in the country, top 5 by most estimations, meaning mine and a few others. He's done a great job there in East Lansing. Ryan O'Blenis and SB Nation's The Only Colors, a great destination for you to catch up on Ohio State, Michigan State matchup for this weekend, the biggest game in the Big Ten thus far in 2021. We appreciate you stopping by, Ryan. Enjoy the game.
Appreciate you having me back.